In this episode, we try and figure out why this thing is lean. Now, it's not super lean. Wide open throttle on the dyno, it was showing like 13.5, which apparently for one of these with K&Ns and possibly no catalytic converters, that's about normal. But I'm not super keen on beating on it with that AFR. I'd like it a little bit richer. I've taken the injectors out and had them cleaned. I didn't get any stats off the guy, unfortunately, but apparently they're all pretty good to begin with, and then he's cleaned them up and they've all improved a couple of percent, but no real indication that that's the cause. Now, we did get a fuel pressure gauge, and as far as I can tell, lacking a workshop manual, which I ordered a couple of months ago, still waiting on it to arrive. As far as I can tell, the fuel pressure is supposed to be 55 psi in these, and when we prime it, it goes to 50 and sits there. It's pretty stable, so I don't know, maybe this one should be 50, but what's not crash hot is after it stops priming, you can see it instantly drops a little bit of pressure, and then over time that just drops down to nothing, which is not that great. Makes the crank time longer when you're first trying to start it, and it's a bit of an indication that the fuel pressure regulator isn't up to snuff. And of course the fuel pressure regulator is in the fuel tank, because these run a returnless system. So the fun's begun, and it looks like I'm not the first person to have a chop at this, because this is the panel from the boot that you have to take out to get the fuel tank, because the fuel tank comes out through the boot, and you can see this just mess of silicon. I can't believe that that's factory. It is just ridiculous. Also, all these holes are just chopped. Top ones are broken, like somebody's pulled this panel out without realizing that you have to, that there was two more holding it in. Oh, my mess. One day I'll clean it. These are the clips that were holding that panel in, and it looks like they're all broken. So when they're in the car, that's what you can see on the outside, and it looks like I would guess there was some kind of I don't know, button top on that you could grab and pull or something. I'm not exactly sure how they work, but that's how they sit in the car, obviously, to lock that panel in. And then I don't know, I had to push them all the way through to get them out, and I'm not sure how you're supposed to refit them, but that's a problem for later. So this is the fuel tank in the boot. Can't wait to get this bloody thing out. I don't know what that is. Somebody feel free to tell me what the hell that is. Like, surely this isn't. For a car with so few miles on it, pretty disappointed in the state of it. So anyway, fuel tank out, undo that, which is the filler, and then we've got the breather for the filler there, single outlet for fuel pressure, and then there's an electrical connector in behind and a evap, like charcoal canister one back there too. There is a fuel tank strap with nuts that, oops, they're hidden back there, but luckily that's the diff in there. You can see if you go in here, You can see the fuel tank bolt there, and I believe it's a nut on the other side. No, that one's a bolt. Interesting. So the GTS apparently has a stud. Looks like RT10 has 2 nuts. So we've got to take them out and then try and get all those other bits and pieces out. So I'll give that a chop. Well, that was fun. Definitely getting far more acquainted with this vehicle than I sort of ever really wanted to, at least at this early juncture. So this is what it looks like when you take the fuel tank out of an RT10 at least. So that's our fuel supply and our charcoal canister. There's the plug for the fuel pump. Over here is the filler, and what I did was to help get that off the tank, I undid both of these and tried to squish the hose back a little bit. Also, the filler's only held in by 3 self-tappers, and so I took those out because this is only fiberglass, so I didn't want to risk breaking those. That would suck. So yeah, there's my filler. There's the breather for the filler, and this is our MRA, modular reader assembly. At least that's what Holden calls them. So we're just gonna unscrew that, and I don't know whether I want to hope there's something obviously broken or what. See how we go. Well, I wasn't expecting that. It has like it looks like an air filter from like a air compressor or something on the bottom. That's wild. Now this sender, it's got a couple of Phillips heads, so that can slide up and down, obviously, so it makes sure it sits on the very bottom of the tank. Now it's showing a lot of wear, like a lot. Like there's a full divot. That's weird, man. So anyway, that's also, I don't know, seems very worn to me, but whatever. So when you lift it up initially, you can see there's a plug which I've already unplugged, so that you can get this up a little bit higher. I used a long screwdriver to very carefully push that tab in, and then I poked a pick in the other side to just sort of push the tab in and lever that off. Kind of looks like it's got an actual 044 in it or something, like a 044 variant, but anyway, we'll see what's going on. I can't actually see, like that must be the reg there. I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, whether it just like leaks out in there. It's definitely not what I was expecting. But anyway, we'll keep pulling apart and having a poke around. Fun continues. So it is a Bosch 046. It's interesting. Probably makes sense. Sits in the bottom of the tank with this. Look at my yes. That sits in the bottom there. That looks like gunk, but it's actually like some kind of very fine mesh filter. That doesn't look like it's clogged up. I mean, unless it's not supposed to look like that, but that's what it looks like. I couldn't get any grossness out of it when I drained it. Now the pump sits in there like so, and then this sits in there to hold the pump up. And there's just 4 self-tappers in the sides here, 2 on each side, that hold that plastic. So just undo the self-tappers, pull that out, then you can pull the pump out. Pump has a one-way valve in it, so that's probably causing my leak down, that not working properly. So I don't know whether it's worth getting another pump or pulling that out and having a look at it. And it does look like that's the actual regulator there, which is not great, because I can't imagine I'm going to get another one of those anytime soon, so I'm going to have to think on that one. That's the anti-drain back valve that's in the end of the 046. There's a tiny little, I don't think I'll be able to video that, tiny little rubber stopper in there that's sort of preloaded by a spring. I think maybe that rubber stopper's just not sealing anymore. That O-ring doesn't look too bad. I don't know what I can do about the anti-drain back thing. Maybe fit an external one, not sure. And here we have our regulator. I'm going to do something sketchy to that, I've decided. So it just pops out, you can undo this, it's just 4 self-tappers, come out of there, and then you can push these back. I stuck split pins in the side to get the tangs off that hook into there, because I obviously don't have enough hands to push all 4 back at the same time as push the rag out, so that seemed to work alright. Just the old poke the split pin in the side there. What I'm going to do to this, can't believe I'm doing this. So fuel pressure regulators, what they have is generally a spring at the top with a seat, and fuel goes in. It's such a tight, I can't believe you can feed, like people make like 500 plus rear wheel through that little tiny hole there. Like seriously, like that's a pick. That's how big that hole is. But anyway, apparently that flows enough fuel for like 500 rear on these or more. So what happens is the spring pushes down on the seat, that regulates your fuel pressure, regulates the amount of flow that obviously makes it to the tank. I'm going to do a sketchy thing which you used to do way back in the day when you need a little bit more fuel, when you were sort of running out of injector or whatever. You can put the reg in a vise and you just squish the top down very slightly, and that increases the preload on the spring, and hopefully that gives us a little bit more base pressure. Oh, one thing I keep forgetting to mention, so when pulling the tank out, this tab you got to be careful of, because it will catch on the edge of that, and if you're not careful you probably crack that or break something or whatever. Luckily this is fairly flexible, so you can just sort of flex it down as you jiggle the tank out over to the side. Let's try and get the tank out. But yeah, so we'll see how we go. So I've got it set up in the press. Obviously you don't need a 20-ton press to squash this, but I figure I can get some pretty good control over how much I compress it. So I just got it sitting in a 24mm socket on the bottom, obviously, so I don't break the tip off up there. That's another 24mm I believe on the top, because we want to just press on where I expect the spring to be. I'm just sort of guessing where that spring is based on the shape of the top there. The height from there to the top is near as makes no difference to 56 mils, and I think I might sort of close that up to like 54-ish or something like that, but we'll just see how that goes. I'll give it a bit of a squish. Hopefully I don't hear any cracking noises when I give that a squash, so I'll see what happens here. Just look at the top very carefully. So we're just squishing that down a touch. Just pop straight back up, so we might just go a little bit more of a squish. We'll back that off. Might have gone a bit too hard there. 70 psi fuel pressure. Here we go. That's alright, we'll just have to put turbos on to use all that pressure. So I've got, that's about what, 54.45 mils or thereabouts. And then if you stick a 0.33 millimeter feeler gauge in there, it sort of just fits. You have to stick it from the other side. So that gives us a bit over 54 mils down from 56. So I squished it a bit over 1.5 mils. And I guess we'll see if that makes any difference to the fuel pressure. With a bit of luck, I haven't done something I'll regret. Righto, so after much pain and searching on the internet, I went and bought a bunch of aeroflow fittings to put a one-way valve on the end of that. But of course you can't just put a one-way valve on and then put a new piece of hose on. You need a one-way valve, then you need an adapter, then you need a barb and whatever, and ended up being way too tall to fit in the tank back together. So I've just put it back together. I've left the one-way valve out. I'm going to do an external one with some EFI quick connects, and we're just going to stick this back together as is. Seems like it's easiest to reassemble like so and then drop it all back in rather than trying to do that up in the tank. So we're back, it's many hours later. I went and exchanged my in-tank concoction of fittings with this external concoction of fittings. Honestly, I swear they make these things to be as expensive as possible. Not that this was super expensive, but it's just annoying that you can't get a female on the one-way valve and you can't get a female on the quick connect. So you need to add this, which then makes the whole thing like twice as long. It's ridiculous. It's painful. But anyway, that hopefully will go on the end of the tank there, and then I'm gonna probably get some kind of foam or something just to try and reduce the vibration, reduce that jiggle on that fitting there. So she's back together. I recommend queuing up the Benny Hill theme on your phone to get you in the mood before you start putting the tank back in one of these jiggers, because that's what it feels like. So we've got the 3 self-tappers in the fuel filler in. I put them in after I got this lined up, and I got that all lined up and sitting correctly. Then I put the 3 self-tappers in, then I tightened those hose clamps. I've got my new one-way valve monstrosity up the top there. That's 3/8 quick connect fitting with a one-way valve, and so that's all plugged in, your vent, all that sort of bizzo. And then you got your other 13 mil down there for the tank. You can sort of get to them half through the guard and half through here. If you're going to go to the trouble of jacking the car up, taking the wheels off, taking the inner wheel liners out, that'd probably make your life a fair bit easier doing that, but I reckon that would take longer than just struggling, which is what I did. I just struggled. And so they're in. Well, let's prime the fuel system, I suppose, and hopefully nothing catches fire. You can see I did put foam underneath that because it's quite a long, heavy fitting. It's going to rattle around, so I put foam underneath it, and over the top that foam's like got a sticky side, which is actually pretty good. Used to use it all the time back when I was a mechanic. It's got a little fuel can hooked up, and I'm going to hit the key for the first time. It's probably going to take forever to prime because there's air everywhere. Pretty sure I can hear that pump back there doing something. There we go. Let's keep priming this for a bit longer. Well, results not as expected. So we've now got, if I prime that, we've now got just over 50 psi, so we've gained like half a psi there. But the one-way valve seems to be sort of holding. It does sort of creep back very slowly. I haven't left it long enough to see if it drops to, say, 40 and then stops, but thought squashing that regulator up would have done more. Maybe I didn't squish it enough, maybe it doesn't work the way I think it does, but they usually all work pretty much exactly the same. Not bloody rocket science. Don't think that's probably really done too much for my leanish condition. Don't know where I'm going to go from here, whether I'll pull the tank out again and crush that reg more, or if I'll try and buy another reg or whatever. Have a bit of a think about that one. Got a lot more to do anyway. Needs a coolant flush. Radiator cap's useless, so the radiator, well, the coolant smells like it's come out of an animal, if you know what I mean. So we'll get onto that, put some O2 sensors in it, see what happens. So just going to do a little bit of a clip on what has happened since the end of that last clip. Did take the car for a drive. It worked well with the one-way valve. The fuel pressure seemed to drop down to about 20 psi overnight, which is less than ideal, but what I've since learned, because I'm learning so much, is that apparently the fuel injector O-rings on these things can actually leak if you fit a proper one-way valve, which doesn't leak down. And so when you park the car with a hot engine, the fuel pressure will rise because the one-way valve is stopping any of the fuel going back into the tank, and so it can push fuel past the O-rings into the motor. So it's probably good that the ProFlow one-way valve that I used is a little bit leaky. I'm assuming it's a little bit leaky. Maybe it's the actual O-rings in the fuel rail leaking, but it didn't seem to have any trouble starting, which you would expect with a manifold half full of fuel. So who knows there. Since the last video, you can see the car's on stands. I've done gearbox oil, engine oil and filter, and did a coolant flush. I can't believe how much water I pushed through this thing to try and get all the old coolant out. I'm hoping that the old coolant was supposed to be yellow. Maybe it was some kind of special coolant. We mostly have green, blue or red here in Australia, but I have seen yellow once or twice. I'm hoping it was yellow. But anyway, so flush that out and put stuff that said it's supposed to be Chrysler compatible in it. Crossing my fingers on that one, because there's obviously nothing that you can just look to suit Dodge Viper in Australia, because, well, I don't know, nobody's cool enough to have Dodge Viper parts. So it did work, it was good, but I wasn't happy with the lack of fuel pressure. So as you can see, we've got the tank out again, and we are going to do a better job, which of course involves spending more money. So the next clip is going to be about that.